Hello, our dear viewers. We are now in Kyiv studio of National Television Company of Ukraine, and you are watching us on Fast Ukraine TV channel that is being broadcasted all around the world. We are starting now the new special that is called United Country, and next few days you will watch us from here, from Kyiv, our conversation in studio, and also live footage from Crimea and all around Ukraine. So now here in my studio I have a special guest. It's Andreas Umland. He's an associate professor of Kyiv-Mogila Academy. Glad to see you, Andreas.
Good evening.
Mr. Andreas, you are actually a specialist. You are actually originated from Germany, but you have been living here for how many years?
9 years.
9 years. Mm-hmm. So actually you know a lot about Ukrainian politics, about Ukrainian policy, and but also you have a broad view from German, from European perspective, and you can compare Ukraine and with other countries. So Andreas, Ukraine now is the most deepest crisis since independence actually, because after the revolution we have Russian troops actually that are being masked in Crimea, and there is a threat of territorial integrity of Ukraine now. Yeah. So what could you say? How it is danger not only for Ukraine but for Europe, all the situation?
Well, the problem is that there are troops being sent here to Crimea by Russia, and this is simply illegal. This is a violation of international law. There is no justification for that. There are instances in world politics when there are these sort of interventions, but usually they are with the blessing of some international organization. Primarily the United Nations, but there have been also other organizations under the heading of which this has been done. But here it's just one country invading another country. And the issue here is not really humanitarian. There is no real humanitarian issue. There is a crisis in Ukraine, but there is no specific threat to the population of Crimea. The issue is simply annexation. So it's an annexation of territories to the Russian Federation away from Ukraine. And it's a clear breach of the whole European security architecture that has emerged after the end of the Cold War.
Well, yeah, I know maybe it will be a hard question for you, but I wanted to ask you, some analysts compare all this situation with actually Hitler times when there was a Sudet region in Czechoslovakia, and also some people compare Hitler and Putin. Could we say that Crimea it's like Sudet, or it's some bit, I don't know, it's not correct from your point of view?
Well, the situation itself might be compared. The annexation of the Sudeten area from in Czechoslovakia to Germany, and now the annexation of Crimea to Russia. But still, Hitler is not Putin. I mean, that's clear. What Putin wants is a sort of a restoration or partial restoration of the Soviet Union. Hitler wanted much more. He had also much more power. The German army was able to wage a world war. The Russian army is not able to do so. So it is a different situation. On the surface, there are some similarities.
I understand. And what maybe Putin now, by his soldiers, army, and his actions in Crimea, could he threaten actually the architecture of international security, not only in Europe? Because you know there are Budapest Memorandum, 1994, and the USA and the United Kingdom are guaranteeing Ukrainian sovereignty and territorial integrity. And actually North Korea, Iran, or some other countries that want to have some nuclear, maybe they just will say to USA, goodbye, we want to have that, and you can't protect us.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly the point. So one point is that the inviolability of borders is not any longer there. I mean, we had that already in a way with South Ossetia and Abkhazia, but these were, at least these were not territories formally annexed to the Russian Federation. They are still sort of pseudo states that are formally independent. They are Russian protectorates and they are ruled de facto from Moscow. But here with Crimea, actually, the issue is now that Crimea may just become a part of the Russian Federation, a subject of the Russian Federation. So this is would be a huge change in the European security architecture. And the second issue is exactly with the fact that with non-proliferation of nuclear weapons, after the breakup of the Soviet Union, Ukraine was actually, by the amount of weapons, nuclear weapons it had, it was the third largest nuclear power of the world. It had, I think, more nuclear weapons than France, Britain and China taken together. So it was really so it didn't really have the ability to use these nuclear weapons, but it had these weapons on its territory. Then there was the Budapest Memorandum, which guaranteed to Ukraine territorial integrity, also economic security, in exchange for giving up these nuclear weapons. And Ukraine did give up these nuclear weapons. And now it has this problem, and this is a huge problem, not only for Europe and for Ukraine and Russian-Ukrainian relations and Russian-European relations, but for the whole world, because it means that if a country doesn't have nuclear weapons, and if it gives up its nuclear weapons, it will be later punished because it's too weak to scare away such attacks. So this is a really huge issue. So how would one now negotiate with Iran, for instance, that it will not build nuclear weapons if one cannot guarantee then the territorial integrity of that country?
So actually, Putin put West in a trap a bit. If I can ask, Germany now is the leader of European Union, and actually a lot of business of Europe or in future of European Union been decided in Berlin. So could we, for example, position of Germany and also European Union stabilize situation in Crimea? I mean, maybe it would be a good chance to say, Ukraine, you have a perspective membership in some, it's official announcement in some 5, 10, 15 or something years, and we can open our funds, our original funds that have been funded from which been funded the regions inside of European Union for stabilization for Crimea. For example, could European Union give some money for Crimeans, for example, to in investments to build some infrastructure, tourism maybe infrastructure, and say that if Crimea stay in Ukraine and Ukraine will be a part of European Union, then there will be like 5 billion, for example, euros invested in Crimea from European budget, European Union.
Well, I don't think that's realistic. That's not how it works. I mean, the EU gives money, and it will be giving money to Ukraine, but this money will not be sort of assignated for Crimea, or it will be given to Ukraine, and there will be certain strings attached to it as well, certain reforms and so on. But there is no. I don't think the EU will buy out Crimea. It will not say, we give money and then. And anyway, I mean, Russia will not be impressed. It's decided in Moscow. Whatever the EU does will not have a big impact in that regard. I think the EU could do something, not so much by way of offering money for Crimea, that would be a bit strange, but by way of pressuring Moscow, for instance, reducing imports from Russia towards the EU, which would then lead to a loss of income for Russia, which would then maybe change people's minds in Moscow. But I don't think the EU can sort of buy out Crimea. I mean, that's not how it's done. I mean, I think there will be now, and it has been already actually confirmed, that there will be support for Ukraine. One figure that has been around is 11 billion euros, which will be in different programs, but this will not be money that we say, you know, we give you this money and then you. This is not how it's done.
Yeah, I understand. Mr. Umund, I just wanted to ask you how all the situation in Crimea shaped the relationships between Russia and Germany, because for a long time Russian and German relationships were quite good, in fact very good, and now after some leak of from New York Times, Chancellor Angela Merkel says that Putin lost his consciousness and actually he lives in parallel reality. Yeah. How?
Yeah, the deterioration of the Russian-German relationship started already earlier. So about 10 years ago, Russia was popular in Germany. Now it's very unpopular with the German population. Much of it has actually happened already before the Ukrainian crisis, in connection with Pussy Riot, with xenophobia in Russia, with other actions, the Russian-Georgian war, the homophobic laws and actions in Russia. And now this has actually increased, and I think now basically the special relationship is over, and I think that the German leadership has to acknowledge that it has had actually a wrong view of Russia, that they were way too optimistic towards Putin. There was too much belief that through talks and through negotiations and trade and consultations and joint projects, one could actually shape Russian politics. And now it turns out one can't. So Russian politics functions on its own, and Germany has very little impact on that.
And okay, so for theoretical and for maybe middle perspective, we can understand that maybe there will be some changes in the relationship between Germany and Russia. But for now, for just practical things, okay, we maybe stop all this visa-free negotiation between European Union and Russia, but actually some goods that are being produced in Germany are still being exported to Russia, and still there are a lot of big companies, gas companies, that import gas from there. So what actually the agenda for now? Maybe some sanctions, personalized sanctions against Putin and his inner circle in the banks of Germany, maybe in some kind of these things, or which else actions could be held?
Yes, there are two ways to sanction Russia. This is first the economic sanctions and the personal sanctions. The economic sanctions will not be so much about the EU selling something to Russia, because if the EU stops selling things to Russia, Russia will buy it somewhere else. In China, in Asia, from Japan or from other. There will be some way to buy it.
Not in Ukraine.
But there will be. There is an option to pressure Russia by not importing, for instance, gas anymore, or reducing the gas imports. I think a total stop of gas imports is impossible, because some countries are more or less dependent on that. But it could be reduced to a degree that it will create problems for the Russian budget, for Gazprom. Gazprom would sooner or later go bankrupt. They need this income. So this is the first way to sanction Russia. Also importing less oil from Russia, less coal. With coal and oil, that can be shipped somewhere else, but with gas, it cannot be transported easily somewhere else. And the second way to sanction Russia would be the personal sanctions, visa bans, freezing of accounts, freezing of assets. There's real estate, there are companies that Russia has. The problem, of course, is that a part of these sanctions, economic personal sanctions, will also hit the EU because the EU will lose income. That's the first problem. The second problem is that Russia may impose counter-sanctions. So they could, for instance, freeze Western assets, EU assets in Russia, or they could kick out entrepreneurs who are currently investing in Russia from Russia, and they would then lose a lot of money. So, and I think that's the calculation of Putin. Putin thinks that it's the West cannot afford to impose sanctions on Russia, because then there would be lots of people, businessmen, companies suffering from that. But I think at the end of the day, I think there could be a full-scale trade war, and I think Russia will lose the war. I think, you know, the EU and the West as a whole is just much bigger, and it can actually give much more pain to Russia. I think Putin thinks that the Europeans are just weak. They, you know, and usually they are. But now I think the situation is becoming more and more untenable, and Ukraine has lots of sympathies now in Europe because of the Euromaidan and all the things, and there will be now a lot of pressure from the public also to do something to help Ukraine. So there, I think Putin is miscalculating. The EU will act slowly and hesitantly, but it will act at the end. It will act. Yeah.
Just a couple more questions, Mr. Romund. How do you think? Well, Ukraine united West, yeah, because there will be, you know, a first common gathering of NATO and the European Union some days ago. And do you think that there could be I don't know, maybe European Union will make some steps to form own militaries, and maybe in Germany there are some conversations that that in Germany should spend more on military and maybe to protect its own borders, not maybe in like a member of NATO, of course, but actually maybe some alternative one, because there are a lot of information that United States wants to move all these anti-missile facilities to the eastern borders of Poland and so on. So maybe this militarization of Crimea also will push the European Union to find more money on army, not only to give these things to United States.
Yes, I think what could happen is that the European Union, there is a military part in the Lisbon Treaty, and I think this will now play a much larger role. For the European Union, the military issues have always been secondary, because NATO basically took care of that. But now, I think with this new confrontation, I'm not sure whether there will be that much more spending, but you know, all the European countries, if you take their armies together, they are pretty strong. So it's just a matter of organizing that as a European force, and I think this sort of military integration will now increase. Whether there will be more spending on, yeah, maybe there could be also more spending actually. But in fact, actually, the military power that the EU has is already significant. It's just not organized as a EU army yet. It's national armies that are separated, and but in fact, I think the EU could play here also a role, because the EU is much less perceived in Russia as a threat. NATO is perceived as a threat. So if one uses, for instance, military as peacekeepers, then these could be EU military. Not American, of course, no, yeah. Of course. But if there are peacekeepers, they would be much more accepted. Perhaps not from Germany, I mean, for historical reasons, but from other countries, peacekeepers might be expected.
But anyway, even OSA watchers now not let in to Crimea, so it's very hard situation. Okay, and the last question, Dres, I just wanted to ask you, do you think that Europe can, at the end of the day, when, for example, it will be a referendum, legitimate or illegitimate, it's understandable that it is violation of Ukrainian constitution and so on, and de facto, if Crimea will be not a part of Ukraine, will Europe, in the end of the day, forget about Crimea? And, for example, well, in a couple of months, it's okay, Euromaidan euphoria will go somewhere, it will be like a nostalgia, and the practical issues, import gas and so on with Russia will be on the table, not Crimea.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I mean, there's no solution right now. I think the only solution would be that Putin basically agrees to compromise so that Crimea stays within Ukraine, at least formally. Maybe it gets more autonomy than before, and then sort of Russia could have maybe some sort of say there. But if Crimea is simply annexed, I don't think this will be forgotten easily, because this is just too much into the face of everybody in Europe. And as you said, it will be a precedent, and it will mean basically that these guarantees that the West is giving don't count anything. So I don't see an easy solution to that. I think it's a different issue than Georgia in 2008. There was a different sequence of events that at least Russia was able to portray it that Saakashvili was actually, the Georgians were actually attacking, and then there was a sort of defense, and then these territories were occupied. At least that was the picture that the world accepted then. But here, I think the picture is there's no real threat, and there's no real defense. It's just annexation. I don't think there will be a sort of acquiescence by the West, and the West will just forget about Crimea. I think it will go on. How it will go on, I don't know.
Okay, thank you very much, Andreas Suman, the Associate Professor of Kyiv-Mogil Academy, here in our studio. Thank you very much for your answers. Now it is a special united country, and in some couple of minutes you will see a continue of this special. See us on First Ukraine TV channels frequencies all over the world. Stay with us.